at this time. We call it Football at 4. We talk NFL. The draft is on the way. There's a lot of stuff to get into, including, I don't know, maybe a more disappointing story, John, to start this off with. And the news of the XFL today, and it appears that not only has the XFL ceased operations for this season, apparently it has no plans to return for next year as well. And that is a very, very disappointing message that we all kind of got shocked with today. I mean, I don't know if it was I talked to Colin Wednesday, and he was saying, hey, we're all still getting paid and everything's, up and up. And then today, boom, they suspend all operation and have no plans to play next year.
Yeah, and I think that was part of the timing is the fact that they had already promised everyone they were going to get paid to the end of the season. Essentially, that was it. That would have been the last paycheck. So I think that was the timing aspect of it. I mentioned when they shut down the league, I mentioned, I think that day on the show, this was a possibility because this is a startup company. They budgeted for 3 years of losses. We talked about the business plan a lot on this show. You can't budget for COVID-19. You couldn't mix. Nobody could have envisioned that. And this is, it's devastating for so many people, so many talented people in that league. And there so many good innovations we talked about off the field as far as rules, as far as transparency in officiating and replay. They were going in the right direction, and it's just something you couldn't have foreseen, and there's no end in sight. So when you're a startup and you can't move forward with a concrete business plan, this is going to happen all over this country. And it is going to be so much more devastating than anything else. And I've talked about that on this show. It's going to crush so many people.
And the fact that, the XFL, they launched, I don't know where you thought it was in terms of success, but this was really out of their hands. I mean, this was something that they couldn't prepare. The only people who apparently prepared for this was Wimbledon. Did you see that story?
Yeah, they had insurance.
Pandemic insurance.
Pandemic insurance. So you do have to give them a little bit of credit, and that's the kind of thing. I think they've been paying for it for about 20 years, I read. So, hey, that's the thing about insurance. I mean, when you pay it and everybody has to have it for their car and everybody's got to have it for their home, and you think about it and you pay it, and you pay it, and you pay it, and you never need it, but that day you need it, it's really important, and you got to be disciplined about it. But I think people can point to Wimbledon, and I give them credit for doing that for a rainy day. But I would venture to guess they thought never in a million years would they need it, and they lucked out by being safe in essence.
Yeah. Now there are some conflicting reports on whether or not officially they're not going to play next year, but would you think that
No, they're not coming back.
You think the XFL is officially done?
It's officially done. And that's coming from some people at the very top of the XFL. There's no plans.
Was it just a money thing? Like they just say, look, we just cannot afford to relaunch this thing again?
No, I think it was the uncertainty of just what I said about the business plan. Like, if you could...
So were they fearful that even if they got through this year, that they would have problems next year?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, you see the doom and gloom, and that's one of the things I've been very critical about people, and I don't care, and I've been insulted on Twitter and called every name in the book.
People insult people on Twitter?
Yeah, shocking. If you... preach doom and gloom, and you tell people they're going to be home for 6 months and a year, and there's not going to be sports, and sports is a small part of it, obviously. I'll put that caveat on there because you got to be very, as you know, Mike, you got to be very clear with what you say to people, or they'll run in all different directions. If you tell people doom and gloom, they're going to believe doom and gloom. And I think you see it happening all over the place. And I think it's terrible. I really do. I don't care what political party you like. I think it's terrible. I think it is terrible what the leaders of this country on both sides of the aisles are doing to the people of this country.
Well, the news came down today, and in fact, it was odd because I saw your tweet. It was the first tweet that I saw, and I was kind of like, wait, what is this in reference to? And you hashtagged XFL, and I clicked on that, and then I just saw a flood of text messages all basically saying like, hey, it's ceasing to exist and it's shutting down all operations. And then I texted Colin, and he got right back to me. He's like, no, they're just shutting these teams down. I mean, I guess the players are still now this was a couple hours ago, under the impression that everything was going to come back next year, and I'm going to have them on at 5:30 tonight. I'm wondering if the players have they been told anything yet?
I don't know if they've been told officially that it's not coming back. I mean, technically they use the term suspension, but the people at the top of the league office have essentially confirmed it's shutting down. I'm not sure if that's filtered down to the players. Certainly to this point, and that's why it took everyone by surprise. The plan was to come back next year, and I think everyone said, well, everything will be fine from next year. But now, as we see, people are talking about through the summer. Can there be an NFL season in September? I've criticized Kirk Herbstreit on the show, saying there's not going to be college football. This is some of the doom and gloom I was talking about. When you're a startup company, look, the NFL, they can handle it. It's a $15 billion a year industry. The NBA, Major League Baseball, they have the coffers to handle this. A startup organization that is budgeted for $350 million in losses, that was the plan, to lose $350 million over 3 years in the hopes there was a TV contract at the end of the rainbow. That was the actual plan. Now you're taking away any kind of certainty from this organization. They don't know if they're going to be able to run games. They don't know what they're going to do. So, I mean, it's almost taken out of their hands. They had to pull the plug. And, we talk about wrestling a lot. I think AEW's in the same boat, not quite as bad because they got a TV deal, but Tony Khan, who is also one of the owners of the Jacksonville Jaguars, he's got to make a decision. How long does he want to keep going and lose money? That's the conversations you have to have, and that's really up to specific owners.
Some sad news there with this, news today. The XFL ceasing operations. Essentially, they will not be back. We will not have any more spring football to watch for the people who were enjoying it, and that seems to be done. Now, let me ask you this. Any thought that a TV network would step in and pay them their station to save them?
No. And that's part of the uncertainty. Already these TV networks are scrambling because they have these guaranteed deals with these organizations, starting first and foremost, as always, with the NFL. And we're talking $8 billion when you add them all together. And you have to start asking yourself, look, that money is guaranteed. There's no out clauses. It's interesting, unless you get an actual copy of the contract, there might be something called a doomsday clause, that if you're not able to put on the programming, they don't have to pay you. And we've talked about that with DAZN, and they've sort of cut funding for some of these lower tier boxing matches, mixed martial arts matches, but that's different. Those deals were different. These high-profile deals for the major sports organizations, those are locked in. Those are guaranteed. And I got news for you. If there is no NFL, if there is no Major League Baseball, if there is no NBA, those television vehicles are going to lose so much money. It's inconceivable. And then you have to start thinking about something different, and the fact that if and when everything gets back to normal or a sense of normalcy, will they even have the ability to pay the contracts as they're stipulated. In other words, if you don't have $8 billion, you can't pay $8 billion. Mm-hmm. Now, as we moved on, when these deals were put into place, there was no question. It was not an issue. Everybody can afford it. Now you're going to have those conversations. And remember all that time we talked about the NFL CBA. And now you're talking about the reason they wanted to get it done is so they could get moving on the next TV deal, and they projected a 60% to 120% increase. Well, forget about that now. Forget about it.
Yeah.
Now they have to wait for that normalcy, or they're going to take a big hit. And I never thought we'd be saying about that, about the NBA or Major League Baseball. Never mind the NFL. You got to start talking about that kind of stuff.
Which is why I guess you see these, especially Major League Baseball, trying to find a way to get out on the field. But you wonder, even if they do play, how are these teams going to generate revenue?
Yeah, I mean, they're not from a sense of obviously live event revenue, merchandising, parking, all that kind of stuff where we talk about they sort of, let's be honest, take advantage of the consumer. So it's hard to feel sorry for them from that point. But all that stuff is ancillary and a drop in a bucket compared to TV rights fees, which I say all the time. I mean, you talk about the NFL. It's a $15 billion industry. This is what I've tried to explain to people for years. $8 billion, more than half of that comes directly from television. So if you cut television from the equation, 15 turns to 7, 8, whatever, if you want to go 50%. But then what people don't factor in, Mike, is how much of the other revenue, which is merchandising, which is live event revenue, how much of that is driven by the exposure of television? So in real world aspect, it's worth even more to these leagues, the television contracts, than it is on paper, because they drive the other parts of the revenue. So if they don't have that, the entire sports world changes, and we are in a sports world doomsday scenario. And no way is something like the XFL going to survive that. There's just no way.
Unbelievable. What about the story? You got these governors, Pennsylvania's governor, they have 2 teams. And this guy, Wolf, is saying, look, I don't see NFL football happening in September in my state.
Right. And this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. And I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. Why is he saying that? He has no, excuse my language, flippant idea of what is going to happen by September. I do not understand these people. I will never understand these people. Why do you go down that road of taking literally hope away from the average person? And by the way, again, and I feel I always have to put this caveat on things. Sports is not important. There are many things in life far more important. People need to get back to work. They need to have a sense of normalcy. They need to support their families, all that kind of stuff. Why do you want to make them hopeless? And I don't care if you have an R or a D next to your name. You're a hypocrite. And these politicians are just awful. And I'm sorry.
I'm not going to argue with that. I certainly think we're in this situation far behind where we should be because of extremely, I can't stress enough, extremely poor leadership at all facets of the game, from every angle, from everywhere. Now, some better than others, but where we are, we should not be in this situation. It is because it was completely miscalculated from the top of the food chain. And that's why we're in this situation with, we don't know, do we know, are they going to play? He's saying we can play. Look, UFC had a poll. He was told by the top of the top, you could go ahead and do what you want to do. Well, it wasn't until Disney stepped in and said, No, you can't do what you want to do. You're not having these fights. I mean, so even if football wants to play, you wonder if it's going to come down to the individual states to say, you're not in my state.
Well, exactly. I mean, and California's already said, and I'll use them as a perfect example, is that they've already said it's not going to be able to be done. So you think about the Chargers, the Rams, the 49ers. You think about that state as a whole. I mean, if they don't have stadiums, what are you going to do? You're going to play in. You're going to have neutral site games. And you just mentioned baseball, talking about Florida and Arizona, whatever, having sort of a spring training flair in front of empty stadiums just to get a TV product out there. And they're going to get tons of criticism if they try to do that. And I don't know. I don't know how to fix it because, you know, one of the greatest flaws of the human condition, people are obsessed with placing blame on people they don't like. So it's more important to blame this politician, that politician, this state, that state, than fixing the damn problem. I always talk about looking in the rearview mirror. People say, well, the Eagles should bring back LaShawn McCoy. Look out the front window. Stop looking at the rear view. It's about fixing it. But everybody wants to place blame.
John McMullen.
I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is such an odd situation, and they got the draft coming up. And by the way, they're encouraging teams to move to Microsoft Teams over Zoom, which is what we use for our which is what we use for our Monday morning. That's what we use for our Monday managers meetings. We use Teams over Zoom. So,
well, you know, like I said, you know, with the money they have, they should be able to put together their own in network thing. But I don't know. That league makes a lot of mistakes for a league that does have the financial heft that the NFL does. And it wouldn't surprise me if it comes off. You know, somebody at the XFL said, interestingly, as we just talked to him, they did a virtual draft. They didn't have a problem. Now, nobody cared because nobody
it wasn't
really hardcore.
It wasn't televised. They just tweeted the picks out.
Yeah, but it was virtual. In other words, they didn't get together at one place. And, yeah, you're right. I mean, there's no television vehicle, and that's what I was about to say. There's no giant microscope on it. As I said, not many people were interested. But you know, the bottom line is it was a virtual draft, and they didn't have any hiccups. It's not that big of a deal. You don't even need – I mean, obviously, we just got done talking about television. They need a television aspect to this because they have to satisfy their partners. But as far as actually picking the players, and you see this hand-wringing from certain coaches and certain general managers, I mean, pick up the damn phone and pick the player. And then let ESPN and NFL worry about getting something out on television. And as far as the pundits talking about it, as far as the highlights, that's their concern. Just pick up the phone and pick the player. Stop worrying about nonsense.
All right, a couple quick things here that we want to dive into. Brandon Cooks sent a 2024 round pick from the Rams for the 57th overall pick. Now, Bill O'Brien is just handing picks away here. What did you think of the – first off, why is Brandon Cooks constantly traded? Is he a jerk?
Well, no, I don't think he's a jerk. It is interesting for a guy who's been that productive to be traded so many times. So that part of it, it almost naturally raises some eyebrows. But I've never gotten the sense that he was a terrible human being. I think it's always something. In the case now, I think it's the fact that he's had, 4 or 5 concussions. And we've always said that you've seen it this offseason, how many more people Luke Kuechly would be the most high profile just walking away from the game. You know, at some point, if you keep getting these concussions, you can't really count on a player like that, so that might be part of it. I mean, the bigger part from the Rams' perspective is I mean, they've done a terrible job with the salary cap, and they've overpaid people. And I think there's $20 million of dead money. That's how willing they're trying to get out of these contracts. And, I talk about it. Fewer and fewer teams have issues with the salary cap now. Everybody's kind of figured it out. But, man, there's always one, and it's the Rams.
Yeah, and they got guys
done a really bad job.
Gurley saying, hey, you owe me money. My check was light.
I mean, and Gurley, by the way, just forget about forget about a cash flow aspect. Maybe they're having issues because of what we just talked about. But I'm talking from a cap standpoint. The way they mismanage the cap, overpaying guys like at positions, Gurley with degenerative knees. I mean, did anybody not see that coming? Overpaying Brandon Cooks to that level. But Bill O'Brien, from his perspective, I mean, he makes some bad decisions. And I'm not trying to couch that with anything, but it's kind of amazing. You look at that team on paper. I put this on Twitter. It wouldn't surprise me if they made the playoffs. They still got a lot of good players, starting obviously with Deshaun Watson. Imagine if that guy made some decent decisions, how good the Texans might be.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting to keep an eye on. And then, obviously, you got the Cam Newton stuff. He says he's willing to wait until after the draft if necessary. I'm interested. Do you think the Patriots are a sneaky team on draft night to acquire a veteran, a Deshaun Watson, maybe a Dak Prescott, something big like that?
Well, certainly not Dak Prescott. I mean, he's going to be the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. It's just a matter if they work out a long-term deal or he'll play on the franchise tag. That's the only question. That's not. Deshaun Watson, I think everybody speculates because the Texans make so many bad decisions. I can't imagine that they would want to move on. I mean, that to me is where the speculation starts and ends. To assume they're going to make a bad decision and trade the quarterback. I guess if anybody's going to do it, Bill O'Brien's going to do it. But even I don't think he's that dumb. No. But as from the Patriots' perspective, I find it very hard to believe they're going to go into the season with Jared Stidham, and he's going to be the starting quarterback, and if not, it's going to be Brian Hoyer. I mean, I got to believe they're going to make a move at some point.
All right, football at 4 in the books. 13 days away till the NFL draft. Plenty more coverage from John at
Unless they cancel it.
You think that's a possibility?
No, I don't. But there will be people calling for it. You see it every day.
Governor John McMullen, do you think it's a possibility?
How could they possibly do this with what's going on? I mean, people need something to look forward to.
I mean, look, there's
fans like the NFL draft.
Yeah, there's all sorts. I mean, they're doing a horse tournament this weekend. They've got the 2K stuff going on. I mean, things are happening virtually. I mean, they could pull this off. This is.
Oh, they can certainly.
I mean, people are doing live TV shows from their basement. They could figure out a way to put an NFL draft on. I mean, it's not rocket science here.
Well, some GMs think it is, but yeah, that's what I said. Pick up the phone, pick the player, shut up, go back to your
I do my fantasy draft remotely every season.
Yeah, and please, people out there, no more auto draft jokes about the NFL draft. I've seen them all. It's not funny.
Did you watch the Miracle at the Meadowlands Part 2 last night? Were you following along on Twitter?
I got in trouble because I laughed at the Eagles for live tweeting like it was real, and which to me is dumb.
Yeah,
a lot of people got upset at me for that. A lot of people.
At JF McMullen, give him a follow. NFL football at 4. We're back on Monday. Thanks, pal.
All right, thanks, Mike.
Yeah, man. He, like August, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.